All right, so this problem says Scarlett sells apples and oranges at the local farmer's market. Originally, 1/4 of the fruit were red apples and the rest were oranges. A bit later, her brother added some green apples to the pile of fruit. After this change, 1/3 of the fruit were apples and the rest were oranges. What fraction of the apples were green apples? So to do this problem, we're going to make the important parts of the question distinct colors that going to make it easier for us to tell which sentence to work on. We'll make that one yellow, this one blue. Right. Now, when we look at the question, we're going to start with the yellow sentence, which says, originally 1/4 of the fruit were red apples and the rest were oranges. So a conclusion we can draw from this is if 1/4 of the fruit were red apples, that means the remaining 3/4 would have to be oranges. This is going to help us visually represent this problem. Okay, we're going to use a table. Okay, and now the first part we're going to write apples, and next bit oranges. And as we discussed before, apples take up 1/4 of the total amount of fruit. There we go. And oranges take up 3/4. I'm going to make the apple section red, orange section orange. Now we've represented the yellow sentence. Moving on. So if her brother added some green apples to the pile of fruit, that's another number of apples added to our amount of apples so far. And the blue sentence says, after this change, 1/3 of the fruit were apples and the rest were oranges. So the number of apples plus some is 1/3 of the total fruit. And as we discussed before, if apples take up 1/3, then the oranges have to take up the remaining 2/3. Here's the problem. Since the oranges are 3 cells of our table, we can't really divide them into 2/3 really easily. So what we're going to do is divide every cell that is part of our diagram in half. And that way we'll be able to split into thirds. We're also going to get the apple one and this one, since apple plus a certain number of green apples is 1/3. Now we're going to make it easier to see the cut. Right, and now we can split the number of oranges in half, so we can get our 2/3. We have 1/3, we have 2/3, and our apples, we have 3/3. Now if you look at the diagram here, we can see that 1/3 is 3/2 of the cell, and our apples should take up 1/3, but they don't. They only take up 2/2 of the cell. And that remaining half of the cell has to be our number of green apples, since we don't know the number of green apples. So that last bit we need to make an entire third would have to be the green apples. We'll put that into our table. There. Now we have all the thirds, and we can continue with the problem. What fraction of the apple were green apples? As we can see, if we look at the apples, they're divided into thirds, and the green apples take up one of those thirds. So that must be our answer. Let's write 1/3 of the apples are green. And we've completed another problem.